congratulating my honourable friend, the member for Dartford, on yet again, with his habitual tenacity, he has secured this very important debate. And the truth is, Madam Deputy Speaker, that many people become very attached to their pets, treat them like family, sometimes better than family. And I know this firsthand. It's true to say that the distress caused when a pet disappears is only heightened if it is suspected or found that the pet has been stolen, whether it's for nefarious purposes or of one sort or another, and that can only aggravate the fear that the pet may come to some form of harm. As I say, I know this firsthand. I grew up with dogs. I had a dog that I loved very dearly, and I know that worry when they go missing. In my case, it was a Rhodesian Ridgeback, which, if you know the breed, means it's very unlikely that they would have been stolen. But nonetheless, we fretted every time he jumped the gate or the back garden, and so I know what this is like. And the truth is, sadly, we are seeing a growing trend of disappearances and thefts of pets, with all of the damage and distress that can cause to individual owners. Now, in government, we've got to make sure that the criminal justice system is able to respond to these incidents, that there are the resources and the expertise to investigate the cases, that there is the will to prosecute them, and that the courts, and I think this is the key to my honourable friend's debate, the courts have the necessary criminal powers and sentencing powers to make sure we punish offenders, and also, let's not forget, deter offending. I hold the ministerial responsibility for sentencing, so I need to be assured that the courts have the right framework and the right powers in place. And I also want to talk a little bit about deterrence, only because it's not something that is necessarily and always talked about and is an important part of the debate, preventing offences from happening in the first place. I'll return to that in a moment, if I may, Madam Deputy Speaker. But first I want to say just a word on the offences available and the sentences connected with them. First, we have offences of animal cruelty and the failure to meet an animal's basic needs. These are set out in the Animal Welfare Act 2006. Those offences carry a maximum of 6 months imprisonment or a fine or both. And the courts also have the power to ban an offender from keeping animals in the future. It's not always the case that a stolen pet has been mistreated, but where they have, this offence may apply. Where the offence charged is theft under the Theft Act 1968, the maximum penalty is 7 years, and that applies to domestic animals just as any other goods or chattels. Now, my honourable friend has made the point today about animals shouldn't be treated solely like some kind of inanimate object or a chattel, and I think he's absolutely right. And when it comes to the criminal law, we have to think carefully about how those concerns should be properly reflected. Of course, justice must be more than the dry letter of the law. And the courts will always take into account the circumstances of a case, but that doesn't mean that they necessarily would need separate and bespoke offences for every possible variation of the crime of theft or every possible contingency. And for my part, I suppose I say this as a minister but also as a Conservative, I'm slightly worried about just creating new offences or specific offences for behaviour which is already covered. I'm not sure that achieves very much. We need to enforce the offences we've got. And, of course, creating new offences for every conceivable situation has a risk of complicating the law, making it less transparent and less accessible. I don't think that's what my honourable friend was calling for, but I think it's a point worth making. The rule of law requires clear, consistent, predictable rules for victims, for citizens, and to send a clear message of deterrence to offenders. When it comes to sentencing, it is for the courts to decide on the right sentence in an individual case, within the maximum set by Parliament. The court hears all the circumstances of the case and is best placed to make that decision. They're helped by the sentencing guidelines issued by the Independent Sentencing Council, I stress. Courts must follow those guidelines unless it's not in the interest of justice to do so. So even then there is some wiggle room. The guidelines are there to ensure more consistent sentencing and identify sentencing ranges and aggravating and mitigating factors. So it's a balance between ensuring the fairness of consistent rules while doing justice to the particular facts of a case and the impact in the case of a dog theft on the owner. Now, the new sentencing guideline on theft came into force at the beginning of last month, and I understand that my honourable friend may be disappointed that it doesn't specifically mention pet theft, but he might want to, if he hasn't already, check out the Sentencing Council website, because he will find there that the consultation on the draft of the new guideline did elicit responses and suggestions specifically on this issue, including the specific suggestion that there should be a separate guideline for pet theft. And the response of the Sentencing Council is available on their website, and having carefully considered the views of respondents, the Sentencing Council concluded that the aggravating factors already in the guideline would enable the courts to sentence appropriately for pet theft. Aggravating factors in the guideline include emotional distress caused to the victim and the fact that the item stolen may be of particular subjective value to the owner, regardless of the strict monetary worth. And I think that was one of the keys to the point my honourable friend was making. And our judges are human beings. They've got often strong powers, senses of empathy, and they have all the powers and, most importantly, the discretion to take into account the full range of impact on individuals of this very serious offence, including the emotional impact on owners and indeed the dogs alike. The guideline mentions the following aggravating factors: that the offender is acting as part of a group or a gang, so if there's an organised crime element to it, where there's significant planning of the offence, where the goods are stolen to order. That, again, is another dimension to this set of crimes. These are all factors which, unfortunately, are often present in offences where a dog has been stolen. So the courts have adequate criminal powers. I believe, Madam Deputy Speaker, they have adequate sentencing powers at their disposal, and recent and substantial guidance to help them reach a balanced, proportionate and consistent sentencing decisions. Of course, all the while taking into account all the facts of the case. And it is precisely because we want them to take into account the individual impact in an individual case that we do need to make sure that we allow judges to retain that measure of discretion. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to say a word about deterrence just at the end, because apart from the sentence passed by the courts, which are partly aimed at deterring other prospective offenders, people can, of course, take action themselves to prevent their dogs being stolen. Improvements in technology has been one of the major reasons we've managed to get crime down in recent years. And microchipping of dogs has been available for over 25 years, and I'm told around 83% of dogs are now voluntarily chipped by their owners. Of course, my honourable friend was one of the tenacious campaigners for compulsory microchipping of dogs, and I congratulate him for his efforts, and he will, like me, be pleased that compulsory microchipping is going to be introduced by the Department for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs in England from the 6th of April of this year. Similar arrangements will also be in place in Scotland and Wales. And I think this is to be welcomed because it's an important step for animal welfare more broadly. It makes it easier to identify dogs and reunite them with their owners. It makes it easier to prove a dog has been stolen, which is important for prosecutions, and I know you want to see more of those. But perhaps most importantly, it can act as a deterrent. A prospective criminal who knows a dog is microchipped is significantly less likely to target that animal for theft. And I think, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the fact that all dogs must now be microchipped is an important factor in reducing these distressing offences, as an as important factor as the effective and flexible sentencing response, which I believe is now already available. So I congratulate my honourable friend again. We can always keep these issues under review. I think he's very tenacious in raising a very important matter, and I think, though, on balance, we do have the right powers, criminal offences, sentencing discretion in place to deal with this very serious crime.
The question is that this House do now adjourn.